What's up guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to make something a little bit different. Rather than like a straight up review, I thought I'd kind of address the idea that, you know, fragrances are really hyper expensive and that this hobby is kind of a bit of a drain on your wallet. So if you want to save money or you want to get into the hobby of collecting and, you know, trying different scents or you know, not necessarily even collecting, just experimenting and experiencing a lot of different scents to find things that work for you. Here's the way of doing it where, you know, you don't necessarily have to sell all your furniture to get that. So straight up, I'm just going to say, like, I'm going to mention a few websites here, and I just want to point out I've no affiliations with any of them whatsoever. It should be fairly obvious by looking at my, you know, subscribe account on my channel, but you know, I'm not a big YouTuber. I don't have any affiliations with any of these guys. It's purely that I use these places before and I know them, so I've got my own experiences. Otherwise, no affiliations whatsoever. So when you first start kind of checking out different fragrances, one of the first things you're going to do is probably just go out and buy a bunch of different bottles. Now that can be really expensive straight off the bat. Especially, I mean, if you look at the reviews I did this week, I did 3 different bottles, and you know, if you total that up, the retail of that's about $650 for those 3 bottles. I mean, that's expensive by anyone's judgment, just for what really essentially amounts to kind of a few hundred mils of smelly alcohol. But it doesn't have to be that expensive. So here's a way that, you know, you can possibly save yourself a bit of cash. Alright, so first up, I don't want to go too deep into this part because my channel's not very big yet and I've not made so many reviews, but look at Cheapies. So the first thing you're going to do when you start kind of exploring fragrances is just want to go out and buy a bunch of bottles. And that can get really expensive really quick. You know, one way around this is to just go for Cheapies and know which Cheapies are going to work. Or, you know, at least cover a broad range. And especially if you're watching this and you want to get some perfumes, you want to get like a perfume wardrobe as such, but you don't really want to spend the earth. Now, there are loads of channels out there that cover Cheapies really well. Things like Redolescence, Mr. Smelly, Joyamin. They're like 3 channels that are really good, and of course Jeremy Fragrance as well. I don't necessarily agree with his taste a lot, but you know, he's a good channel. And you know, those 4 channels, they'll have a lot of reviews of Cheapies that you can check out. All I want to say here is that, you know, if you want a broad wardrobe, I'll give you 4 recommendations real quick. Armaf Derby Clubhouse Blanche, Rochas Man, Burberry Brit, and Armaf Très Nuit. Now, if you've got those 4 fragrances, you're more or less covered, like throughout the entire year, and a lot of different situations. You got Armaf Derby Clubhouse Blanche, which in my opinion is a 4-season scent, and it smells great. It's fresh, it's invigorating, it's interesting. And then you got Rochas Man, which is kind of a bit less sort of. It's more of a kind of, I would say, 3-season scent, 2.5-season scent, and it's quite sweet, but it's kind of sexy, a bit gourmandish. So you know, you've got that covered, that base. You got Burberry Brit, which is a great winter scent that's cheap, and then you got Armaf Très Nuit, which is a great spring-summer scent, which is fresh, clean smelling. So you got those 4, you're covering all your bases. If you only want to get 3, take out Très Nuit. If you only want to get 2 of those, take out Burberry Brit, and you've got Rochas Man for the winter or autumn winter, and Blanche, Armaf Derby Clubhouse Blanche for spring summer. And if you only want to take, you know, only want 1, then take out Rochas Man and you just rock Armaf Derby Clubhouse Blanche all year round. You could easily do that. I mean, it would probably grate on you after a while. You'd probably want more than 1, but you know, that's just an idea of how you can kind of cover a lot of bases cheaply. You know, you can buy all 4 of those for less than $100. You know, if you just buy 1, you're going to be spending like $20. Buy a couple, $30 or something like that, and you're sorted. But like I say, I don't really want to focus too much on cheapies today because I haven't really done any sort of cheapie kind of videos yet. But I will get around to that. Instead, I want to kind of go, what if you want to explore fragrances a bit more? What if you want to kind of check out what works for you and what doesn't, what notes you like and what you don't, if you like gourmands or not. What if you want to just find a new vanilla, things like that. And there are ways of doing this without having to spend an awful lot of money or the rest of your life traipsing through department stores. So first up, partials and decants. Now, go on Facebook, join a Facebook group for fragrances, and you're going to find tons of people who sell partials of bottles. So bottles they're sick of, they're tired of smelling, they'll sell them on. Quite often they've been through like 2 or 3 hands before they're selling them, because people are blind buying them and not liking them and reselling them. So it's a constant churn, and so you can get really good prices on partials. You can get like 30-40 mils left in a bottle for not even a quarter of the price it would have cost you, retail. And of course, it's not a full bottle, but do you really need a full bottle? Especially if you're going to start exploring scents, you're going to end up with hundreds of mils, like litres of perfume that you're never going to use. So, it's not a bad idea. The other thing is that decants, you can get some really good decants on the Facebook groups where people are buying like 100ml bottles or 150ml bottles even, because the larger bottles are the best value. And then they'll decant like half, if not more, of the perfume, because they don't need 100ml of perfume. If they're like a collector, or which most of these Facebook group people are, they don't need 100ml of perfume, so they're willing to sell on like up to 50-60 mils at a time sometimes of their perfume in decants. So you can buy like 10ml decant of a really expensive niche for a reasonable price. Now you might say, well, 10ml, that's not going to last me very long. But if you're just exploring, it'll last you a long time. It's a good way of sampling it and getting a really good wear for it. Not only that, about 10 mils can last you a few months if you've got a couple of fragrances. So, spending £15 on, or $20, something like that, on a decant that will last you a few months is a good way to experience that scent and get a good feel for it and see if you really like it and if it's worth the extra money. And if you're never going to buy the full bottle, it's a good way of just kind of regularly kind of either chopping and changing your wardrobe, or just slowly building up like a decent overview of what you like, or just buying a fragrance that you like but in installments. Of course, you're never going to get the bottle, but if you really need the bottle, that's up to you to decide. But at some point, I'm willing to bet that bottles take a back seat to value, especially if you're collecting hundreds, or not even hundreds, like 50, 30, 40 bottles. Perhaps you don't need those bottles really. There's also websites. There's a bunch of different websites that you can get decants from. Now, they're not always great value. If you're in England and you're looking for Creed, I'm going to say Tom's Creed decants. He sells 10 mils of Creed perfumes at really good prices. And unless you want to buy a full bottle of Creed, I would only go to Tom, because he just does great value and great service. And that's like Tom's Creed decants. I'll put a link in the description. There's also, if you're in the UK, fragrancesamples.co.uk. They're not as good value, they're quite expensive, but they have a really good mix of niche and designer fragrances. Say you're generally looking about £20-25 for a 10ml of a niche, which it's a bit expensive, but if it's the only way you can get it, it's sometimes not bad, depending. I don't use them that often because I feel like it's a bit expensive, but there are niches that you're just not going to get any other way unless you're willing to blind a £200-300 on a bottle, and that's not something I'm really that willing to do. So that they are out there. There are options like that out there. Now, Another way of doing this is samples. So again, like Decants, just smaller, getting like 1.2, 2 mil samples. There are a number of ways you can do that. Feel Unique do a website called feelunique.co.uk. They do a monthly sample thing where you can get 5 samples for the postage price every month. You can only do it once a month per account, bear in mind. So if you're willing to make 2 accounts, they will ship 2 accounts to the same address. I might or may not know that. And you can pick 5 samples and they'll send it to you for $3.95, which is the postage cost. And you also get that $3.95 to redeem against a full purchase if you decide that you want to buy the bottle after you smell the sample. But even if you just buy the samples, that's 5 different fragrances every month, 1.2 mil, 5 mil fragrance. That's, if you want to chop and change or you're just looking to explore, that'll sort you out. And if you find one you like, as long as you're not caning it every day as a daily driver, you can pick up 1.2 mil of that every month. And 4 other different ones just to try out, and you can keep yourself going. Like, admittedly, you're not, say you couldn't wear it as a daily driver, but you could wear it 3 or 4 times in that month, and then you're still picking out 4 new ones as well to test. So that's a really good way of doing it. Jovoy of Mayfair, they sell, Jovoy of Mayfair, they sell expensive niches, but they do samples as well. So, again, this is a little bit more expensive, and it's kind of veering to sort of not so great value where you're spending £2 or £3 per mil. But they'll send you a sample, like 1-2 mil sample of a fragrance that you choose, and they're some really difficult to get and expensive niches. So, you can smell really refined and good and find some really obscure, nice, gorgeous smelling niches. And you don't have to spend the work to try that. And they're quite friendly service. Generally, when I have ordered samples from them, they've sent me extras that I didn't order that are in the same ballpark. For example, I ordered a vetiver-based niche last month from Jovoy, and I only paid for that one. But when it came, they sent me 2 other samples as well. That were sort of vetiver-based niches. So, they're super friendly. If you live in London, in fact, go to their shop and you can get a sample of anything you like for free. It's only if you don't live in London that you have to pay the postage. So, yeah, there's a couple of ways, and there are numerous websites to say, I'm not affiliated with any of these guys, these are just people that I use. But there are other websites, numerous websites where you can get samples, and at first you think 1.2 mil, 2 mil, that's not going to do me. But when you've got a few of these, you realise that, actually they go quite a long way. So lastly, what about things like discontinued or uber super rare perfumes that they're just selling for absurd prices? Now, you can spend the rest of your life hoping that you'll get one at a good price, and it might come up, it might not. That's the joy of collecting, right? Is that one day you might find that kind of jewel, that gem that you've been after for a while. It's the same for me with like record shopping, all those sorts of things. I have like a list in the back of my mind of things that I'm always after. Some of those records and some of those fragrances I may have been after for several years, if not tens of years. I'm not willing to pay the hundreds of pounds that people are after, but there's always that kind of hope that one day I'll pick it up off eBay for a steal or things like that. But until that point, what do? Well, you can check out Dupes. So what are Dupes? Dupes are basically like clone houses where they sell really cheap perfume oils or perfumes that are supposed to smell like something else. Now, there's a kind of a grey area here between like what people think of these. I'm not massively into them in terms of just buying any old fragrances like designers or even niches a lot of the time, because quite often you can, if you remember these Facebook groups or do any of the other things I've just told you, you can get the actual perfume for not really any more money. But for things that are discontinued or just really hard to get, like as in really hard to get, and the chances of you ever actually obtaining it are slim, I don't see the problem with Dupes. And then okay, you've got to say, well, do they ever hit it perfect? probably not. It's probably not 100%, but it's probably close enough. It's probably in that ballpark. And if it's a discontinued old rare scent, or a scent that you've never even smelled, but you're curious to smell it, do you really care if it's 100%? Because as long as it's in the right ballpark, it's probably going to smell good. B, it's going to give you an idea of what you want if you've not, what you're looking at if you've never smelt it. And if you have smelt it, can you really trust your memory for how you remember it? And if it was a long time ago that you first smelt this discontinued scent that we're talking about, you may have changed tastes or all sorts, which can change your perception of how you remember that scent anyway. So as long as the dupe is 90% in the ballpark, you're okay. So in that case, I say dupes, go for it. In terms of that, Perfume Parlour's a good one. They have a huge collection, and a lot of them are discontinued or just niches, which you're probably unlikely to ever find. So why not check them out if that's what you're looking for? Some absurd fragrance which cost pennies when it came out, but now it's discontinued, so people are selling them on the grey market for 500 quid a go. It's just not worth it. So yeah, I think that's not a bad way. Okay, so that's that. It's a little bit different this time. There's no kind of review or anything, but I just wanted to kind of address that whole, and you see a lot of times people saying fragrances are a really expensive hobby, and yes, it can be really expensive, but it doesn't have to be. And there are ways of exploring it and finding new things and checking out all sorts of different smells and finding what you like without having to, like I say, sell all your furniture and sit on the floor eating baked beans for the rest of your life. So yeah, subscribe, comment, I don't know. Cheers.